We are so glad you joined us today for Universal Design for Learning. We're looking at designing for learner variability. So we'll see a lot of research that we'll pull in today and kind of build on what we talked about last month around understanding by design. So with that, my name is Mandy Green. I work in professional services at GW. So today, really, we're just going to look at some of the UDL principles. We're going to look at some learning barriers that we all encounter with our students. And then we're going to look at how we can apply some of those strategies to what we do every day with creating learning experiences for our students. So quick poll, I'm going to pop up a poll. And when you see that poll pop up, go ahead and select your answer. You're going to be able to choose multiple responses. And we're just talking about which of the UDL principles do you feel confident in applying right now? Before we ever start talking about any of these, which ones do you feel comfortable with? And you can select multiple options, like I said. So share with us which ones you feel comfortable or confident using as of right now. So as you can see, it looks like about half the group is comfortable with that engagement factor. Expressions coming in second, and then representation is coming in third. And if you're wondering, Mandy, I don't even know what these are, that's okay, because by the time we finish this webinar in the next 27.5 minutes, you will know what these principles are, and you'll probably realize that you're already doing some of this in your own class. All right, so we are going to do a little strategy that I love when I was in the classroom teaching. I'm going to ask several questions. I am not going to ask 20 questions, so don't worry. But you're going to need to find your reaction button. So most likely the top banner, there is going to be one that says react next to where you can raise your hand or use the chat. And in that one, we're going to use two main responses. Because they're all positive in that one, yes is going to be the hand clap. So when you click on the react button, you can select the hand clap, which most likely are the applause, is the middle button for yes. And then just like an oh, I see some of you found it. Perfect. And then just kind of a thumbs up that just kind of means no. So the thumbs up means no. The applause means yes. Here we go. I would ask, are you ready? But I think you all found the response. So here we go, y'all. All right. Does giving timely and meaningful feedback contribute to sustained engagement? Give me the applause for yes or the thumbs up for no. So I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a lot of applause, just applause all over the bottom of my screen. Okay, awesome. Next question. Can providing vocabulary supports like our glossaries that we have in our textbooks and visual cues help our students better understand new information? Yes, clap, thumbs up for no. Okay, I'm seeing lots of claps as well. Let's go on. Does using models, diagrams, or graphic organizers to clarify complex ideas align with the representation principle of UDL? Applause for yes, thumbs up for no, or maybe, you know. All right, lots of applause. Is scaffolding complex tasks into smaller steps part of supporting multiple means of expression? Yes or no? I'm seeing lots of applause again for yes. All right. Can students better express their knowledge when they have the option to use assistive technologies such as speech to text with some of our e-readers and online books? Okay, once again, I'm seeing lots of yeses. All right. Thank you for that. So hopefully that kind of set our foundation of thinking about what we're going to talk about today. We're looking at our learners and how they engage with learning, with the content. So with that, let's jump into our first one, which is just a profile of a student. So we have a student who is bilingual, speaks multiple languages, and they're in our welding program. Now, this student has strong hands-on skills, but sometimes struggles with that technical vocabulary, right? We've all have that student probably who struggles with that technical vocabulary if it's not their first language. Then this student also is really hesitant to ask any type of clarifying questions in the whole group setting. All right, so you got this student in mind. Let's see about this one. Now, just based on what we know right now, what are some of this learner's barriers to success? Just feel free to drop them in the chat. For this student, this profile, what are some possible barriers to success for our profile A students? I'll give you just a moment to drop that in the chat. Yeah, processing time. Yeah, Kirsten. Darlene saying the language, absolutely. Psychological safety, articulating themselves verbally. Yeah, the confidence to ask questions, their ESL, participation, right? I know many of the places I have worked, English was not my students' first language, and they were always afraid to ask questions in the group. But to me, one-on-one, they would ask questions. Cultural hesitancy, absolutely, Kimberly. Confidence, safety, yep. Communication, right? So sometimes that technical vocabulary is very different than our day-to-day vocabulary. That can be a struggle for them. Also, asking questions in front of others, dealing with confidence, safety in that learning environment. Absolutely difficult with written language, right? So we think about language acquisition. Sometimes that written one takes a bit, and then that vocabulary, right? Absolutely. Okay, y'all are right on track. Now, just thinking about what we already do, what are some ways that we could support? What supports can we provide for Profile A that could help this learner? What could we do in our classroom? Links to terminology, visual cues, absolutely. More visual aids, absolutely. Icons, pictures with words. There we go. Yeah, Veronica, vocabulary with pictures. Katie's talking about sentence stems. Absolutely. Caitlin's talking about vocabulary pictures, abbreviated directions, flashcards. Yeah, Ralph is talking about pictures to text. Paul's talking about the definitions embedded in text, right? Absolutely. So these are all some things that we could use to help this struggling welding student, right? So we could provide some pictures that help him with that technical vocabulary. Scaffold instruction, as we're talking about, QR codes at the welding equipment, absolutely. Enable them to verbal to text, speech to text, answer in a private chat, absolutely. So these are all ways that we could help this student. Okay, so we're going to go through two more scenarios, and so we're going to keep all of this in our mind as we kind of add on to it. So now we have a different student, right? So this student is highly engaged with the hands-on task, but starts to lose focus during those multi-step written procedures or like safety briefings in our trades course, right? They miss critical sequencing of the steps that really affect the safety and the performance. And if we've ever been in an auto lab, we know that many of those things deal around safety in that lab, and many of those job lists and tasks have step-by-step instructions. So here's my first question. What are the barriers that we can identify with Profile B with our auto learner who has a hard time staying focused on multi-step procedures? And Kirsten's already jumping in there, like break up the instructions. Yes. Checklist. Absolutely. Frank's talking about sometimes he pairs students up to their strengths. Absolutely. Have them work with a buddy. Checklist, executive functioning processes, right, Darlene? Charles is talking about chunking the content. Yeah, and so it's Frank and Charles. Yep. Absolutely. So these are all some ways that we know could be some barriers. And then now you're already talking about ways that we could support them. More visual cues. Absolutely. All right. So we had our student who did not speak English as a first language, most likely, who was in our welding course. Now we have a student in our automotive course who doesn't do well with multi-step procedures and staying focused. Let's see about our third profile. This student participates during in-person labs, but struggles completing online assignments. Also, with uploading large project files is difficult. So what are some barriers that we can see from this screen for our cybersecurity student who has limited reliable internet? So I feel like the first problem would probably be limited reliable internet since they're having to complete online assignments. Yeah, but yeah, Kirsten, computer capabilities, functionality of the computer, the internet, computer skills, quite possibly, technology that's available. Absolutely. So what are some ways that we could help set the student up for success and support them? Yeah, so maybe turn assignments in person, provide them with a hotspot, some internet accessibility, Provide school Wi-Fi cell device, an offline virtual lab. Absolutely, Robin, that's great. Multiple methods of demonstrating. Absolutely. Provide step-by-step instructions, maybe to get that large project file uploaded. Absolutely. And then provide an open lab is what Jennifer's saying with hotspot devices, etc. Printed materials. Absolutely. Okay, y'all, we're all in the same headspace. So let's break down the components of UDL first. So we first kind of did the 20 questions, the 20-ish questions, to kind of get our minds thinking about understanding universal design for learning. And then we kind of looked at some profiles. So here are some profiles of students and ways that now we can work with them. So when we think about this, the UDL principle of engagement, that's the first one we'll discuss. This one really focuses on how we spark and sustain learner motivation by providing options that really honor and value our students' diverse backgrounds, interests, and even their needs. So when we are designing for engagement, we can think intentionally about how we're going to recruit or think about those interests, the support, and even how we might foster self-regulation. So this might involve offering multiple choices or meaningful choices in how students collaborate. How are our students connecting with that content in the real world? Now, within career and technical education, that comes a little bit easier to us because we do have the labs, we do have the hands-on learning. So we are starting to make those connections to the real world. But also, how can we create a learning environment that really reduces anxiety and distractions? You know, by planning and kind of being more proactive with like our clear expectations, our varied student participation structures, and even authentic hands-on tasks, we really are helping all learners access the lesson and that content with confidence and invest more deeply in their own learning. Yeah, and I see Kirsten jumping in there. Sometimes she uses a class hook. Absolutely. Okay, so this is the summary and the basics of engagement for UDL. Let's look at some examples. So by allowing them to choose between working individually or with a partner or with a small group, like some of you mentioned earlier in the chat, we can use real-world anchors. So we can begin a lesson with a short industry relevant video or scenario to make the content really more authentic. We can think about providing multiple ways for our students and learners to participate, kind of like we are today. We have the chat, we have polls, you can have verbal responses, visual cues, so that everyone's comfortable and engaging at different levels. Also, we can think about like how we're going to chunk complex tasks, like how we're going to break down those multi-step procedures into smaller, manageable phases that also kind of include check-ins to kind of help with motivation. And I see many examples coming in the chat as well. Please feel free to continue to share because we're just learning with and from each other today. Also, kind of the last one on the screen is talking about interest surveys. So just quick polls to for students to kind of identify strengths, maybe career goals, technical interests, and that sort of thing. So here's some examples for engagement. Let's move on to the next one, representation. So this UDL principle really focuses on looking at our learners, making sure that they have more than one way to perceive and understand information. So we know not all students process text, speech, or even visuals in the same way. So by providing multiple forms of representation really helps everyone access the content without barriers. What does this actually look like in your classroom, right? So sometimes this means using tools like diagrams, models, audio narration, vocabulary supports, all those best practices that we talk about a lot to really clarify that meaning. And when we as the instructors are really intentional about how we present the information in these diverse formats, we're also making learning more equitable for our students and really empowering our students to choose the mode that makes the most sense to them. And that falls in line with that student ownership of learning. And I'm seeing lots of examples come in, like of ag, going to the barn, and there's hands-on, multiple teaching techniques. Great chat. Keep the chat going. That's awesome. So some examples of what representation can actually look like as well. Those multimodal materials. So using text, images, diagrams, audio, short videos, whatever works best. Using simplified visual guides, right? So convert some of those dense instructions into flow charts, checklists that were mentioned in the chat, color-coded diagrams even. it looks like our vocabulary supports. In a lot of the GW textbooks, you'll find those glossaries and image libraries, which really help bring the terms to life and to make sense for that technical vocabulary. You'll also find, you could find audio captioning options. So when you're presenting slides or even a video or webinar like this, we could use closed caption to make sure that's on, make sure the audio narration is turned on. And then of course, examples and non-examples, and sometimes non-examples is the most powerful form of learning with the representation as well. Okay, so we have covered engagement and representation. Let's jump on the last one, which is expression. So this focuses on making sure all of our students have multiple ways to show their understanding. So a single format like a written test, we know may not capture all of the students' abilities. But we're lucky in the career and technical education space that we have courses that are hands-on, creative, have technical processes in everything we do. So by offering some choices, such as demonstrations, verbal explanation, diagrams, written products, we let our students really express their learning in ways that match their strengths. And so this is cool. And then when we add the scaffolds like checklist, exemplars on top of that, we allow those supportive tools like recording and graphic organizers. We reduce performance barriers and we really create that clear pathway for all of our students to demonstrate what they know, which is the coolest thing in the world. So some of these things might look like choice in how they demo. So are they doing a presentation? Are they making a digital diagram or some type of prototype? Also looking at scaffolding supports, right? Providing templates, exemplars, examples and non-examples could fall here too. Assistive and digital technology. So speech to text, you'll find that in many of the GW e-readers, you'll find speech to text options. And also options for project formats like a model or recording a step-by-step explanation or even a digital animation. Of course, and then the iterative process. I always told my students as adults, I never just get one shot. If I mess up with something at work, most likely I have to go back and redo it to make it better. So giving students a chance to go back and make their work better through practice demos and rough drafts is always available as well through expression. All right, so I see a lot of your examples coming in. Frank's also talking about some of these like various formative assessments, the oral assessments, differentiation. These are great comments coming in. But you might be wondering, okay, that's great, Mandy. So now we know the 3 principles of UDL, but like, how does that work together with what we talked about last month with the understanding by design framework with instructional design? So both of these complement each other because they focus on different parts of the learning process. So as you might remember, understanding by design, or UBD, because we love little letter acronyms in education, that starts with the end in mind, right? So it clarifies big ideas. You're going to get your essential questions and those core understandings that all learners should achieve. And once those goals are clear, UDL, the engagement, expression, and representation, comes in to ensure that every student has access to learning. So with UDL, we can design multiple pathways for our students to engage with that content, to make sense of that information, and to show what they know. So UBD, understanding by design, defines the definition. And you can think of UDL, or universal design for learning, builds the accessible routes to get there. So when we think about the stages, we know that stage 2 is all about assessment. And that's where you identify the assessment evidence that is needed to determine whether a student truly understands that learning goal. And UDL, what we talked about today, strengthens this stage by widening the ways that students can demonstrate their understanding. So rather than relying on that single format, just as a test or a single performance task, we can offer multiple options like presentations, demonstrations. There's some in the chat going on right now too. Multimedia projects, verbal explanations. This really ensures that we're measuring that learning goal rather than just a learner's proficiency with one specific mold. So then if stage 2 is about assessment, we know stage 3 was all about those learning activities, that learning plan, the sequence of the lesson, the sequence of the activities, and the experience that guide our students towards that result. UDL, what we're talking about today, enriches this stage by making the instructional design proactive rather than reactive. So we're anticipating what our students may struggle with, and we're building those supports directly into that plan. Scaffolding, we're offering options for engagement. We're providing those multimodal materials, varied participation structures. So you can think of UBD gives us the structure of the lesson flow, but UDL ensures that that structure is accessible for all of our students. Yeah, and I just saw a comment that Jennifer's comment just popped up on my bottom of my screen too. It says, I love this because it enables students to demonstrate their understanding in a way that they are most comfortable and successful. Absolutely. And Frank's talking about retention is the end game. All right, so one more right here. We're going to get on this one of how these work together. So when we think about this, one of the most powerful aspects of combining these two frameworks together is that they support each other, right? They complement each other without undermining each other. So UBD gives us that firm, intentional structure, right? We have clear goals, we have aligned assessments, and we have purposeful instructional activities and design. UDL thrives within that, right? Because it gives us the flexibility, the choice, the accessibility features, the optional formats, and the varied supports. So this combination really prevents instruction from becoming rigid on one end or unfocused on the other. It keeps us kind of in that middle. So we have rigor and coherence along with responsiveness. Absolutely. All right, so together we know that we're going to get both high quality and high inclusive with this. So UBD keeps everyone anchored in what really matters, and UDL ensures that instructional path considers our learner differences ahead of time and integrates supports going forward. All right, so here's where I would love some more feedback. I love the chat that was going on while we were talking about the three principles, as well as how these two kind of ideas complement each other. Share with us how you might use UDL in your classroom. And you may already be doing it without thinking about it, because many times us as instructors and teachers, we do these things, but we're never intentional about how we talk about them. And then you're like, you go to a session about research and you're like, I'm already doing that. So tell me how you are already using UDL or how you would like to use UDL principles tomorrow or next week in your class. I'll give you just a moment to get that in the chat. All right, let's see, let me scroll down. Let's see what's coming in the chat. Yeah, Frank's talking about it provides options for mastery of content. Absolutely. Yeah, Kimberly's talking about like the 3D models, right? So providing examples for each assignment. Absolutely, Carol. Yeah. And I also like provide non-examples. I felt like a lot of my students related better to the non-example than they did the example. So those examples and non-examples are really helpful. Yeah, Lynette's talking about the flexibility and the structure, small groups, paired learning, movement in the classroom. Absolutely. I did a lot of small group in my classrooms, but I feel like I could have done more paired work, like just with a partner. I don't know why I didn't do that. Anthony's talking about interactive model. Yes. Darlene's talking about create an educational document. They select the topic and the method of demonstration. A lot of student choice there. Ralph's talking about the QR code, loves the QR code idea for illustrations. Yeah, for pieces of equipment. That's great. Let's see, Maria's talking about providing choices for her students, providing roles for the groups. Yeah, I feel like that helps a lot, is providing roles in the groups. So it's not just like here's our group assignment, but everyone has their own responsibilities. That's really nice. Frank's talking about transferable lesson plans. Darlene's talking about links for medical terminology for the words, because that is very vocabulary heavy course. Absolutely. Veronica there is talking about for vocabulary words, use a TPR, a picture, and a color-coded definition in the English-Spanish dictionary. Yep, absolutely. Eric's talking about use every opportunity for students to teach other students, right? They always say, like, once you can teach a topic, like you really know it, you've internalized that information. Absolutely. So I'm going to keep going just for the sake of time, but feel free to keep dropping some things in there just so we can read them the next 4.5 minutes or so that we can keep learning with each other. All right. So we talked about the three principles, we looked at some learning barriers, and then we now are thinking about how we can use these ideas in our classroom going forward with different activities, different learning experiences. So I'm going to launch another poll. So you might notice that it looks very similar to the poll I launched at the very beginning. And so after our, 20-ish minutes, 25 minutes together today, which UDL principle do you feel confident applying? So I'm going to launch that same poll. You can select as many options as you would like, and then hit the submit button. And then we can view the responses as well. So after today's session, which one do you feel most comfortable applying? It looks like representation increased some, as well as expression. Yep. And engagement stayed about the same. So as you can see, this was kind of a pre-test, post-test, so that we can kind of see our growth over the course of today's session, which is really great because all of them are pretty close to about 30%. Engagement's a little higher. So we're looking at all three of them. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide. You can still keep dropping ideas in the chat for the next couple of minutes. So last month, we talked about understanding by design an instructional framework. And today we just got the very brief introduction on universal design of learning. And we talked about how they can complement each other. So come back on March 31st at 2 p.m. Central Time. And we're going to talk about how they really work together. So today we started introducing ways that they complement each other, but we're going to look at how they align with the learning goals, the assessments, and the learning activities to create like flexible pathways of learning. So I would recommend scan that QR code with the camera app on your mobile device. And then we'll see you back up on March 31st. If you haven't already signed up, we already have 130 people signed up for that session in March. So we can't wait for you to join us there as well. And then I'm going to go to the last screen. And I'm going to say, I hope you had a really nice, easy introduction to universal design for learning. You realize that you're already doing really great things as instructors. And then you got at least one tidbit that you can add to your toolkit going into this rest of this week or next week. With that, we love feedback, so please leave us some feedback, things that you really liked, so that we can continue to do those. And if you have other topics that you're interested in, please feel free to drop that in the comments of that Design for Impact form as well. So we would love that. It is 28.5 minutes past the hour. And so with that, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us. We can't wait to see you on March 31st when we really dive into how UBD and UDL complement each other and create really great learning experiences for our students. I hope you have a super week, and all of this will be sent to you in an email that will include a certificate, the PowerPoint, the recording, and an additional bit of feedback research that you can read on your own time. So have a great week, and we'll see you March 31st for how UBD and UDL really create learning pathways for our students. Have a good one.